I'm going to walk you through the application exercises we did in class today, class 7 of Principles of Microeconomics. I have, 3, 4 maybe on this same prune market example. I just didn't want you to have to solve numerous systems, just kept going with the same example. And there is a delicious bowl of prunes. If you've never lived with anybody that's a little bit older that has those every day, that's what they have. They are marvelous. Full disclosure, my dad used to have a prune orchard, and so I spent a lot of time with prune trees. They actually call them prune trees. They're dried plums, but the type of plum that you can dry to get the prunes that you can bring to market, we call them prunes even when they're on the tree. All right, the first part of this problem gave us the key information. They gave us the demand curve. They gave us equivalently the inverse demand curve, just the same equation in a different form. The supply curve, and then the inverse supply curve. And then they ask us what's consumer surplus and producer surplus. And I would always recommend solving these problems start to finish rather than trying to do your usual multiple choice methodology and just rule out the ones that don't make any sense. If you were ruling out the ones that don't make any sense, by the way, A and C are gone because their units are wrong, right? We see that we know consumer surplus and producer surplus both are P times Q units, and Q is in 100 million pounds, P is in dollars per pound. So when 100 million pounds per year, dollars per pound, we multiply those two together, pound in the numerator, pound in the denominator cancel, and we get 100 millions of dollars per year. So that's A and B would be just ruled out. I tried to do get the wrong answer of B and D by doing it backwards, but group 6 I think said they did it backwards and got a different answer. So maybe either I messed up or their algebra was a little off. Doesn't make that much difference. Let's proceed. All right, so I've reproduced my stylus. It's a little even messier even than my usual handwriting, but I've reproduced that key information. The demand curve, the supply curve, the equilibrium, and then we're asked to find consumer and producer surplus. So what do we do? Well, that was actually, a lot of the groups sort of looked there at the question and were just at a loss. Well, we need to graph this problem, and that's because taking consumer surplus and producer surplus are easier. They're sort of geometric concepts, and having a graph makes them easier than trying to do it via algebra. You can do it via algebra, but graphing in the space where price is on the vertical and quantity on the horizontal is going to be easier if we have inverse functions. So P equals 6 minus Q is going to be a little bit easier to graph. Remember from way back when, we express lines, the y-axis variable equals the y-intercept plus the slope times the x-axis variable. So that's always the form of a line. And then quantity supplied, it equals P over 2. If I just solve for P, I get P equals 2Q. Should have a superscript S, that should have a superscript D. I'll graph those curves. If I had graph paper, I wouldn't need to do any algebra at all, but I don't, so I'll do it graphically and then do it. That just turned out really ugly. There we go. So I know I'm going to get a downward sloping demand curve. The y-intercept in this space is 6. Slope is -1, so that means the x-axis intercept is 6 as well. The supply curve has a y-intercept of 0, and then it has a slope. If the demand curve is sloped -1, I'm going to want to draw a curve graph function that's twice as steep. This is freehand. So I'm going to be looking at a price somewhere above 3 and below 6, of course, and a quantity somewhere below 3. If I had graph paper, I could have drawn precisely, but we're going to need to solve this algebraically for the equilibrium. And that's easy enough to do. I usually do it via the demand and supply functions in the equilibrium condition, but it's perfectly equivalent to just set the inverse demand curve equal to the inverse supply curve. Anyway, we have the function for, where's my little arrow? We have the function for demand. We have an expression for supply. We have this equilibrium condition. So I can just substitute for QD 6 minus P, substitute for QS P over 2. Those are equal. I'll have one equation and one unknown. So 6 minus P is equal to P over 2. I can add P to both sides, and if I add P to both sides, I get 3/2. P equals 6. Now I need to multiply both sides by 2/3, and I end up with P equals 2/3 of 6, otherwise known as 4. That's dollars per pound. And then I can plug that into either the demand curve or the supply curve. If you want to make sure you're right, do both. 6 minus 4, plugging it into the demand curve. Just plugging the value 4 in there, I get Q equals 2, but these units are hundreds of millions, 200 million. That's a lot of zeros. Pounds per year. And I'll just label 100 million pounds per year, in parentheses, and P is dollars per pound. All right, well, what do I know? I know that the y-intercept, at the equilibrium value, the price is 4, and the quantity is 200 million. I've got 100 million so on my unit, so I can just write 2 there. All right, well, now it's a matter of finding consumer surplus. I know that's the area below the demand curve and above the price. It's going to be this little triangle here. 1/2 times base times height, CS, equals 1/2 times. And you can do it either way. Actually, this is a 2 by 2, so it doesn't matter whether you flip it one way or the other. Times 2 times 2 equals 2. But remember, we've got 100 million. Q is in 100 million, so it's 2 means 200 million dollars per year. And doing the same thing for producer surplus, we know it's the area below the price line, above the supply curve. Producer surplus, that's a 4 by 2 if I turn it on its side, a 2 by 4 triangle. It doesn't make any difference whether you turn it on its side or not. 1/2 times 2 times 4. Pardon my handwriting. And 1/2 times 2 times 4 is 4, but remember it's 100 million pounds on the x-axis, so we get 400 million per year. And there we have it. I can erase my little question marks because we aren't wondering anymore. We know exactly what these answers are. Put my little dollar sign back. I accidentally erased it. I'll circle that. And I guess for complete, let's go back. I went back too far. Who doesn't want to look at that picture of prunes again, though? And remember, consumer surplus is blank. Producer surplus, so the first one was consumer surplus. There we have it. B is the right answer, and that's the end of this story.